started. So first things first, Merry Christmas, everybody. And wear this at a party last night.
Politically correct.
I had one wear on my head that blinks, but I'm not putting that one on today.
Okay.
So anyway, so I'm going to turn this over to Judith, who is the chair.
Yeah, so I just wonder, it's only 10:02. Should we wait a couple of minutes, even if we have a quorum? Let's just wait another minute.
Ainsley, how many people do we have on the stakeholder group that we knew about? So just to know.
So I believe we have 27. So a quorum would be half that plus one, or half that, which I believe is around like 14.
So we got 16 or 17 right now.
We do. You know, so it's unfortunate that you can't, I don't know if there's some way of fixing Google Meet so that you can see everybody, because even when you don't have something showing on the screen, it seems like you only see a limited number of people. I don't know if that's something you can change in settings. Anybody have any idea?
Well, Ainsley, you're working on it. Is that possible, like on Zoom?
No, that's something you have to individually change on your settings.
I wonder if I do that. Okay, I'll try to figure that out when I'm not talking.
If you go to the three dots, it'll give you options for change layout, and that's the way to do it.
Yeah, okay.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, so I am officially calling us to order, and thank you all for being here. I know it's a busy time for everybody. We are, in case you're confused, which it would be easy to be, we're originally the MEJC Subcommittee on Education, and have now morphed into the advisory stakeholder group for the commission, which was appointed recently. And Steve Steurer, I'm sorry, I know he doesn't pronounce it that way, but my German background compels me. You say Steurer, is that right, Steve?
Well, it depends who I'm talking to. Steurer, and then all kinds of other aberrations.
That's the same thing with my name, and I don't pronounce it the way the Germans would pronounce it either, but somehow with your name, I feel it more.
My father was an Austrian immigrant, yeah, so he would say Steurer.
Anyway, Steve is the commissioner. By the way, have the senators been, I know there were some vacancies for state senators. Have they been appointed yet? Still not.
No, and we're the appointments office is going to work with after the new year to see what we can do. And I was going to ask Senator Jill Carter, but she is not going to. She's leaving the Senate.
Right.
So we'll have to talk and see.
Well, yeah.
Anybody who has a senator that they vote for in their area wants to get them interested, go ahead and contact them and put them in contact with us if they're interested.
Okay, well, I'm going to turn it over to you at this point, Steve, to talk about these large questions of data collection.
Okay, thank you. The one thing that isn't on the agenda, but I just want to say something very quickly. We've kind of resolved the issue right now with we were going back and forth with Rochelle Rubin, Director of Correctional Education, and we've gotten some really good answers as of yesterday. So we're just going to go on with the rest of our meeting today, unless there are any questions about that. But we've got too many other things to do than to get involved with, let somebody else take care of some of that stuff for us. Okay. So if we can, I sent out a thing called goals and process, and just briefly, I want to go through that really quick. If Ainsley can just put up part of it and for us. And when in discussions having with the governor's staff, Ainsley and I wanted to make sure that we make clear to everybody what the goal of the legislation is. So I put this together. Really, the first short sentence there is: the purpose of the Prison Education Reform Commission is to recommend the best model for delivering all education programs in Maryland prisons. That's putting it in a nutshell and in English, taking out of legalese. The commission was created to improve the numbers and kinds of programs delivered under Department of Public Safety and the Department of Labor. So we're going to conduct a thorough study, and that's what we're about to begin. And there are other factors that we can't control, but we are aware of. There's shortages of staff, correctional staff, and so, but our focus is educational and job training needs of the population. So we will address all the programs and as we can, and we're just going to try to be very academic and very. We just don't want to get into big fights about it. I just want to say what it is and what we can do. We want to, because there could be differences of opinion about this or that. And if there is, we'll just put that aside because we're not going to entertain getting into any big squabbles. I just don't like seeing that on this commission. I want to have it very positive. So if you can read the background, which tells you what you're right now. The DOL had public safety share different responsibilities and what programs each one is responsible for. I won't go into the detail there, but we also have special ed, just to note that. And we have federal monies for post-secondary. But I'd like us to go to, my printer would print this stuff upside down. I'd like us to go to the page on data. The last section. Ainsley and I have been doing a lot of work in the background on data. And so we put in this kind of a catch-all, the bushel basket of all the kinds of things we could think of, and there's probably more that we can look at. And this is something that each one of the groups, if we break into them today, should take and look at, because if you're going to do, for example, higher ed, then you're going to need to look at Department of Public Safety Correctional Services and federal funding, which are, in a couple different sections. If you're going to be in the group on ABE, GED, special ed, you want to look at federal requirements, et cetera. So this is meant to be a document of things to look at. Like, let's just, for example, DOL is right there at the bottom. Program information. So we should be getting programs available, numbers of school days, enrollments, attendance, instructional intensity, as one of our members of our group requested, program completions, waiting lists, testing statistics, etc. So those are things that your group should say, okay, what can we do with all this, and how do we gather it? Ainsley and I are going to be there to give you some of this data that we already have, that we've been requesting for various sources. We've gotten Department of Labor information, we've gotten Department of Public Safety information, correctional enterprise information, and a lot of stuff we've just gone off on our own and gotten, and we will give it to you if you don't have it, or tell you where you can find it. And if we don't know, we're going to find out for you. So we're going to be the workhorses for the committees. Does that make sense? So, okay. So if there are any questions on this process and procedure, this is sort of like our blueprint for moving forward with our various. I know Delegate Pasteur asked a key question last time. Where are we going? What is it? What is the process? And so I hope, Delegate Pasteur, have we sort of answered that for you?
Yes, and I appreciate that. Yes, this is very helpful for me.
Okay, so just to let you know that we're listening, and when somebody has a big question, we're gonna write it down and get an answer for it if we don't have it right then.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, and then if we can turn now to the next handout that you got, that Ainsley and I worked on. She put it into a nicer format. So we've got the purpose down, and we're going to recommend a better model, and we're going to, for making the work practical, instead of just all of us getting together and talking about this all the time, we figured it'd be better if we could break into some groups and see if we can get somebody to sort of take a lead with each group. And we broke it this way: ABE, GED, special education, higher education, career and workforce training. Two of those, 1 and 3, are delivered pretty much by DOL, and higher education by public safety. So we're hoping that and transition services is tied to all these, and it's pretty much delivered by cooperation with public safety by DOL. So if you can scroll up a little bit, please. We put together guiding questions for each group. If we break into groups, here's the kind of things to get you started. And you can think of all kinds of other questions, but what are the data that public safety DOL need to collect and publish? What are the data currently being collected? Are we really collecting everything we need? And there's questions about that in certain areas, and you'll see as you look at this stuff. What data are needed to measure the size and quality of programs? People want to know how big they are, how good they are, and what we need to improve them. Some things we can't do too much about, like budget, is always a problem. What kinds of data collection protocols and software are being used or planned? We're getting more and more software tools, and some of those have been recommended to us. And Danielle put together a list, and at some point in a future meeting, we're going to have her explain some of them probably. What are the deficits in data collected, and what other software tools we might need? What are the major recommendations? And so after you would work on all this stuff, maybe you're going to start seeing things you want to recommend to the group. Are there systemic issues that impede the collection, distribution, use, and evaluation? I think we can all agree that when you're in government, you have systemic problems no matter how well you plan. So what are they? And what can we do about them? And that's where we get to the recommendation stage of our reports, when we start doing that kind of thing. And do the state agencies coordinate and cooperate on crucial data is a good question. And and then getting back to the very core of the legislation, what recommendations can be made toward a better model? Can we design a better model of delivery, an administrative model, and delivery model, and structural model, whatever we can come up with? And that's really everything in a nutshell. If we do that, we've got a report that the legislature wants. So here's Ainsley put together this nice flow chart for us. Each group would do data and information gathering, do their analysis of this data. At some point, we're working behind the scenes to identify best practices. We're going to be, Danielle put us in contact with several state directors in other states who she feels have good models, and I have some ideas about some other states. So Ainsley and I are going to be actually meeting with some of these people. We put out a doodle, and people are giving us the times available. So we're going to try to collect information and pass that back to you about what other states, how they're structured, what they do. Formation of recommendations would be a next step, and then writing the final report. So those 4 and 5 are down the road a little bit. So the work group structure. So we're going to. This is going to be a little bit up to you. If we can break into 3 groups, and we still have to see if we can do that, or we'll have 2 groups instead. I don't know, but we need to. You guys are going to have to figure out for yourself. So, for example, let's go to ABGD special ed group, and each one of these groups will have these 3 things: develop an education-focused, statewide framework of policies. That's part of what the law wants us to do with all this data. Research best practices and identify measures that mitigate risk factors. So keeping that in the back of your mind as we go is overriding intent of the law. And we put special ed with ABGD because usually in special ed, if people have an IEP, they're in adult basic ed and GED as a core program. And so that's where we put special ed there. The next group is post-secondary. It's the same questions, and they come straight out of the law. We're supposed to develop these statewide frameworks, research best practices, and identify measures to mitigate, criminal activity. And then the last group is workforce and vocational training. Same questions. Actually, this one, we missed something. I just noticed. Evaluate current workforce programs. That should be in every one of those. We said that, and then apparently we missed that. But so there's 4 things you do. You guys will evaluate some of these programs and make recommendations. Okay. So we can get back this document with that edit. And that's kind of it. So now it's open question. Let's do some open questions, and then we can go down to see if we can break into groups. So now it's not 7 in the morning, it's 10:15. Your brains must be working by now. You must have questions.
So one question, so there are really two parts. I mean, it seems like ultimately we want to make recommendations, but there seems to be a huge piece of it, which is data collection, and exactly how these subcommittees, whatever we call them, are going to go about getting that data. Isn't that clear to me? We're going to write to, I mean, if I'm, let's say, on the higher education subcommittee, we would write to Danielle Cox or and ask her, we'd figure out what we want to know. I mean, I'm a little worried that we could get so down in the weeds with the data collection that we never get beyond that. I mean, that list of the things that we might want to know is very long and complicated, and we don't want to get too bogged down.
Right. Does anybody I have a suggestion, but let's see what everybody else thinks.
I think John Feaster has a question or response to that.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add that some of those data elements have changed over the years. Some of the methods in which we've captured that data has changed multiple times over the years. So the time frame in which we are looking to have a view to that data will have a huge impact on, how easy it is to provide it and how accurate and informational it is.
Okay. Yeah, and I think we've got to make a decision between walking in among the trees and getting in a helicopter and looking at the forest. And so probably going back and forth a little bit at the data. And we have, everybody can get a copy of all the CEC reports that we have. Everybody can get a copy of, if you ask, we can get it to you, of the previous Educational Coordinating Council reports that were the Department of Education, as an example. Correctional Industries, we've already got a lot of stuff from them, and we can share that. And Danielle's got a ton of stuff that she's been sharing, and so we'll give you what you need. And Ainsley and I are going to try to sit in on your meetings, just to be so we know what you need and what you so we're going to be, your workhorses for you. Okay. At some point, we'll probably ask Lois Davis from Rand Corporation to help us formulate what the model is for evaluating programs, because Rand has done a lot of work in this area. So we can bring in guests, the committees can bring in guests to talk to. You might want to bring in somebody from a certain agency and ask them about workforce something or library something, okay?
Delegate Pastor has her hand up.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Thank you. I want to go back to the word something, because that's where I am, the something. So we have data, and I believe I'm such an educator. And so I love data, because what we should do starts, whatever we're doing that involves education, has to start with the numbers. So we know where our people are, whether they're adults, children, or whatever. Where are they? So after we look at them, but then I get frustrated after a while, because people get caught looking at the numbers and the data, and we keep looking at the same numbers and just moving them around. So my question is, what then are we doing after we have gathered this information? What is our responsibility? Because I will be very frank, I really do not like how people who are incarcerated children in juvenile detention, I don't like how the education systems are going. I don't like what we're giving them. So I would hope, and so I guess my question is, are we going to use the data and work with folks to show how we lay out a 21st century, here we are, educational plan for those who are incarcerated on each level. Looking, and I'm in that first group. I love that first group, the special ed or GEDs, whatever it is they need. Are we looking at this to fashion something that is really going to change what folks who are incarcerated are getting on a day-to-day basis so that they can really go out and be a part of our communities again? Or is our focus to collect data and then give it to someone else who we hope will be that educational think tank? So which one are we? And and if that's too much, I'm too much all the time. So just so at some point you just cut me off and just mute me.
And then we also have a couple hands up. I don't know if they were in response to that or if they were additional questions. So Danielle Cox, Christian Gant, and John Feaster.
It was in response. And Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, Ainsley, my interpretation of the law is that we come up with a education program delivery format for we got to make sure we do understand that the adult system and the juvenile system are two totally different things. They are run by two totally different agencies. The education that is running them are two totally different agencies. So we got to make sure that if we are looking at, okay, this is what we want for juvenile detention run by the Department of Juvenile Services, and then education run by the Maryland Department of Education, that is a totally different delivery form system, and they do their education completely different than
That's not our, excuse me, just for interrupting. The juveniles are not our.
That's what I thought, because
I'm asking.
Except those that are in the Department of Corrections.
Okay, so then that is also different, right? Because that is the YDC, that is the Youth Detention Center. There's only one facility that houses juveniles under the age of 18, and that is the Youth Detention Center.
That's not ours.
Yes, and that is run by the Baltimore City Public Schools, and it has to be because they're under the age of 18, and it's in Baltimore City. So if we're looking at, I don't think that even falls into this either, that specific. Everyone else who is in the correctional, Department of Public Safety, DOC facilities, those are all over the age of 18. None of them are juveniles. Okay. So I want to be very clear that when we are looking at different forms of delivery, there are multiple different agencies involved here. And that if we need to be very focused on which one we are looking at and what facilities and agencies we're targeting here. Because I delegate, Pastor, you mentioned something about juveniles. So I just want to be clear that we are not going to be looking at juveniles at all. We're just looking at the adult population.
No, I've got that. I understand who we're looking at.
Okay.
My question really was, but I always speak children, okay? Because children, if they live long enough, grow up to be those adults. And too often they go from one thing to the next.
Right.
So I always say that. But my question is, now you said delivery. All right. I understand delivery. So that was the center of my question. What does that delivery model look like? It is not just about us collecting data. We're to take that data, I thought, and create or formulate that delivery model.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
I believe so. We're taking that data and doing that. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. One of the things that every state's organized a little differently, and rightly so, because every state is different, as you know. So we're going to be looking at some states because there's some similarities and lessons to be learned from different states, and bringing that back to you and say, well, in Massachusetts they structure this way, in Ohio that way, in Texas this way, and whatever ones we managed to get good information on. So you can look and say, have we put together the model of delivery that's best. The model delivery also means what kind of technology we're using, and our concept, our holistic concept of education. You know, the last thing I want to do is us come up and say, well, we should use a lot more technology, but without considering that first of all, I need face-to-face instruction, and you know, so it's got to be both.
We have several people
Go
waiting to
ahead.
speak. So John, I assume the way it comes up on the screen, I'm not that used to Google Meet, is the order in which people signed up, but I'm not really sure. John Feaster?
Sure. I just wanted to just say that I really appreciate Delegate Pastor's sentiment and determining what we're going to do with the data. One thing I will point out is that the data is going to allow us to see two things: either A, the quantity of folks that we help, or B, the quality of the programs that we deliver. From a quality perspective, understand that our programs are nationally vetted programs, so they are regulated, you know, and recognized as such from the standpoint of whether or not the certificates that they earn, again, 90% of them would be considered nationally of, you know, the quality that we would expect. So the only other thing that I could think of is the quantity of folks that we have that are actually going through the programs and completing the programs. And I agree with you. Once we see those numbers, we should really be looking at, and I think it is the responsibility, Dr. Sturr, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, to really come up with what some of those ideas are to increase either the quality of the program that we present or the quantity of folks that we get through the program.
Yeah, I'll have a comment, but I'll make it after the next hand raisers.
Okay, I think Christian Gant is next, and then Alyssa Pio.
Yeah, I just had a question. Delegate Pastor, her comments kind of sparked my question. Is there any aspects of our work that's also been affected or already kind of in reform due to the blueprint? Like, does the blueprint touch what we're doing at all? Is there any crossover, like, you know, requirements or anything like that? So I'm just raising that as a question. We don't got to answer it, but just as a point to consider.
It's
yeah.
complicated.
Go ahead,
I'll let Danielle go. Yeah. Technically, no, it's not specifically. The blueprint doesn't specifically affect the programs that we offer. However, the blueprint does make some, I'll say, very audacious attempts at standardizing what credentials should be offered in the school system. And I believe that we'll be looking at what the blueprint is recommending and trying to implement as much as possible, because there are some really great ideas that have come out of the research done by the 2030 Commission and the blueprint.
And I'll just add that the biggest piece of that is the career and technical education programming, and also then certification for teachers, because I'm not sure if how many of you know, but our teachers have to be K through 12 certified in order to work behind the fence. So Blueprint requires that they are actually nationally certified by a certain amount of years. So that will eventually come into play. But John is right in the fact that it does not really do much when it comes to like high school diploma. Let me do that. So high school diploma certificate or recognition versus GED, because in the state of Maryland, a GED is a high school diploma, and it is actually in Comar that they do GED programming. So because of that, like we have that, we do high school diploma though programs for our juveniles, though, obviously, because they are under the age of 18 through Baltimore City.
Alyssa?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Delegate Pester's mention about the juveniles, and then there was a comment about YDC. I just wanted to note that I do think that transition from YDC to the state correctional facilities is actually an important data point, because I think there is some low-hanging fruit there in terms of students who end up transitioning before their graduation date, but maybe weren't able to finish their coursework and then end up having to start all over again on the GED. So if you have kids who are making their way at YDC at a Year Street Academy, and they would graduate in June, but their birthday is in March, April, May, and don't then have that opportunity to finish those credits, they end up, as I understand it, on the adult side in a state facility and are starting all over again in terms of having to do the GED. And, we started some conversations with Baltimore City Public Schools about whether there can be an opportunity for them to finish those credits, even though they're in the state facility, and capture those kids. So I just want to mention that, and I'll be in this, hopefully in the subgroup on AV, GED, special ed, and can bring it up there. But I do think that there's some group of kids, maybe very small, who could actually have finished their high school if their birthday was just a little bit later. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. And let me just mention, there's only about 1 or 2 of those per year that we see, if that. And they kind of fall into a loophole because Baltimore City Public Schools cannot give them, if they are sent to a facility in Hagerstown, which is Washington County's area, Baltimore City cannot continue then that programming with them. So that's issue, right? That's a problem, first off. Second, because they are now adults, they fall under COMAR, which is GED. So that is another thing. And then 2, our teachers in our facilities are hired, and their MS-22 are specifically stated to do for the GED programming, and not also then to do a whole nother programming with one student and then teach them. They're not teachers of those specific subjects. Does that make sense? Like, you have to teach. I
Right.
have to be a math teacher to teach that. And those are not, we don't have that out in those facilities. So there's multiple layers of, things that happen because of that. So.
Right. But I think if we are thinking kind of creatively and out of the box and making recommendations in terms of best practices, I don't think it would limit the group to make a recommendation that some of those barriers be addressed.
You can make that
You
recommendation.
can make the
I hope you do.
recommendation. Right.
Even though it's a small group of people, I think it'd be good that you keep that in mind as we go through and hang on to that recommendation. It could be one of our many recommendations to solve this conundrum that we're in.
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure we knew the barriers
Yeah.
and you knew and understood.
This is where the data is going to come in, where Danielle has some data, labor has data, public safety, you have data from your experience with the youthful offenders. Put it all together and say, wait a second, I've got a problem here. Can we recommend maybe a legislative fix? Who knows? I mean, that's probably what it will take because it's in COMAR. But anyway, go ahead. I want
I
Judy,
think,
who's next?
Steve, I think you're were on the list of somebody who had raised their hand. So
Yes.
it's your turn.
I want everybody to keep in mind something I've said to you before, but the general estimate is that half the people or so incarcerated in the state prisons, and we're about 16,000, I checked the other day, give or take, are in need, big need of academic or career or transition transition services. We are not serving them, and that's not because people aren't, it's not, we don't have enough resources is what it's basically boiling down to.
Well, what's the percentage you said of
Well,
the 16,000?
About half of the people, if you have don't have their high school diploma, or if they do have a diploma from somewhere, their skill level is such they got out with, GED is a really good measurement. It's a solid test. If you pass that, then you're much better off than probably the average kid who graduates from a not so good high school.
But I've heard you say before that there are different levels of passing the GEDs.
Yes, that's a whole nother thing. But there's a ready for college level, and there's just a general, you passed your high school diploma kind of level.
So you're saying that even the ones who just passed the high school, even if they're not ready for college, they're much better off than somebody who hasn't gotten it at all. Is that
probably, yeah. But the point I want to make is that one of the recommendations I'm going to keep pushing for personally is we are not reaching probably half of the people that we should be reaching because of one thing or another. And that may be simply a fault of resources. But we need to address that. People, I have this crazy ideal that prison ought to be a school system. You go to prison and you go to school and you help fix these, like you do with your mental health or substance abuse. And there's our areas we don't have enough resources either. That's my goal, to increase the number and the quality. Any more hands up, Judy?
I don't, does anybody else want to? John,
Well,
Gordon,
John has one.
yeah.
John Griffin.
Yeah, hi. Dr. Stera, I agree with what you said, that prison should be a school system. And despite all of the challenges that DOC has right now with staffing and everything else, prison can be a school system. And I say that from my experience being in prison, recently released, dealing with the education department there. It's really just a matter of quote unquote procedure. So a lot of the issues that we're talking about here could be solved by, exchange of data from case manager to education and vice versa. And a lot of this information to identify potential students can be captured during the intake process. But my experience is that information really isn't captured by the intake process because nobody's doing it or nobody really knows to do it. But years ago, when I first started my incarceration, they did that. The intake process actually did have some questions set up to say, okay, do you have an education? Do you have a high school diploma or a GED? Blah, blah, blah. And if you answered no, you were put on a list to be assessed by somebody. And, back in 2000.
That's not the case anymore, John? That when people in that they are not asked those questions?
No, they're not.
No, John, we definitely do. I have the data. So it's being done.
Well, we can take a look at that and see. Take a good look at that data. Yeah.
I say that based on my experience and what I've seen. And, I've seen a lot of people come in through intake at ECI, and the case managers there aren't asking those questions. And so the inmates, the incarcerated individuals, are left to their own devices to seek out the education department.
Then that's something I need to know so I can address it specifically at ECI, but
Yeah,
it is happening. Yep.
This is a very crucial thing. We're a bunch of educators who are in the system. I'm a former in the system. I always thought we were doing a great job. And then some guy comes up to me in the hallway and says, I want to go to school. And I look into it and he's been missed. And then we find out we got a problem. So it may be that we've got a lot of good data that Danielle Cox has seen, but then we got a lot of things that aren't happening. And I really rely, we have several people who are recently returned citizens on this committee. And I want them to share their, their issues that they saw, even if sometimes we feel, defensive about it. We got to just look at it. And, so John, I appreciate that. And I know Danielle's doing a good job. So I think there's two sincere people here who can really work on something. The other aspect of this that bothers me is I just don't think we get enough of the public school data on a lot of people. And Danielle, you know the system better, and John so what are we getting into case management from public school history that would really be helpful? I would really want to see a little more about, because there's criminal justice data all over the place, but what do we have about educational data,
I just want to make sure that John finished what he was saying, and then we have someone else, Jamel.
Go ahead, John. John, go ahead.
Yeah, you got the basic idea of what I was trying to say. And I also just want to add that it can be done. So as Danielle pointed out, she is receiving data like that. So maybe not every institution is suffering from that. So it's just a matter of, reminding the players at the institution to what they need to do. And it's easy because
I've seen elementary. It's hard to imagine, presumably they have a list of things that, there's no shortage of, forms to fill out and questionnaires. So you would think that would be on the list, but I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Oh, no, it's okay. I was just saying, I've seen it work at ECI in the past where, everybody traded the information that they needed. And even if it didn't happen, like in my case, I have a bachelor's degree and that information fell through the cracks. And 3 weeks into my incarceration, I got called by the education department to take a adult basic education test because they thought that I didn't have a high school diploma. Okay, fine. So,
what grade level did you achieve?
I aced it.
Okay.
So that landed me in the principal's office for a nice lengthy discussion. But But then he identified the fact that I had a college degree and, I've had a professional career, and he then put me to work in the education department. So I didn't end up not falling through the cracks. So it is possible. I think my question is we just need to make sure that everybody understands the data collection and data trading policies and procedures, and that will solve a lot of the issues.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jamel, am I pronouncing your name correctly? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for letting me speak. So I'm not from the state of Maryland, so I'm still learning, you guys' legislation and pieces of that. And I am an MSW student, and I'm at UNB. But just far from and what's so funny is I'm actually doing a program analysis for this semester because I'm an advanced standing student. I'll be graduating in less than 11 months. I'm doing my master's degree. But far from what I've seen, I think we just need, and this is just from a lived experience piece, and because I've gone through this in your state, I've had trouble, and I have my bachelor's, and I'm a summa cum laude student with a 4.2, and I've still have had challenges with my background, and my background is nonviolent. It's a driving offense. I've had multiple DUIs, but I'm in recovery. I'll be celebrating 5 years next month. Thank God. But I'm also a published, author, student and book author, and I've done a lot in the community. But still, here it is, a master's degree I'm getting ready to have. In your state, I'm still having problems. I think, to be honest with you, what I've learned when I've do my program analysis is 15-page paper I'm doing right now. I think we need to hit the laws first, and certain laws that need to be addressed. So I'm looking at Senate Bill 0054 that was brought up and didn't even leave the committee. Okay. That's on occupational license and certification, criminal history, prohibited disclosure, and predetermination review. I want us to be productive, not counterproductive, not working against each other. And what I'm seeing is I'm hearing data, I'm hearing all this. This sounds all good, but we doing all this hard work, but we're really not going to see the fruits of our labor if we can't even get some of these the laws to look past a person's criminal history, especially if it's nonviolent. I have DUIs. And the reason why I say this, and one more thing, Mr. Stewart, before you speak, because you look like you get ready to say something. I'm just watching. That just comes from my security background. I always, look at people's face and their structure. So let me just say this. So I'm doing my internship at the Center of Restorative Change through UNB School of Social Work, correct? The youth is my passion. I lost my father to suicide. He was only 41. He was a Master Chief in the Navy. That affected me. So yes, I did not make the best decisions, but I'm using my past mess as my message today. So I wanted to get involved with the child welfare through UNB. So I went, application, got the stipend. I was all so ready to go. Do you know they turned me down at the last minute, right before we getting ready to start school? And thank God for the God of my understanding, he came through. They wouldn't let me get it. And the lady of the director from the program in which the school I'm going to, she told me she didn't reveal why. I already know what's on my record. Okay. It's the DUIs. That's all I got. And she said, well, we can't let you go through. So you see what I'm saying? So that goes back to Senate Bill 0054, but then also we have, sorry, I got papers all over the house. Yeah. And then we have Senate Bill 720. So if we can get these if we can get this legislation to pass, I think you will start seeing an increasing in your numbers. And I'm only saying, and sorry that I speak with passion. I'm from New Jersey too. So you know, I'm passionate about this. I'm standing up for my sisters and brothers who don't have a voice. And I feel like I'm in a recovery meeting right now. Thanks for letting me share. I'll keep coming back. But that's all.
Just wrote that
Thank
she
you.
connect you.
Take a look at some of the chats because I think Gordon put something up to use for you. I'll say real quickly because I was smiling. This is what we call, in another term, the black box, with all the laws and regulations that limit employment. And this committee, we can, I mean, if with your work, Jamal, if you come up,
Jamal.
I'm sorry, Jamal.
I don't want to get I don't want to be
I'll get it
repetitive
right.
and everybody be calling me
I'll
that,
get it
but it's
right.
okay.
Jamal, with your work, you are uncovering information and data that's relevant to this committee. So you're a source of data. So keep bringing this back, because one of our recommendations is if we train all these people, but they can't get a job because blah, blah, we need to recommend to the legislature what to do. Okay.
I think look at the chat, Jamel, because I think you'll find some useful information there. I just want to let the other people who wanted to speak. I think Adam Cummings was first, and then, oh, John Feaster, did you take your hand down?
I did. Adam can go ahead and Dr. Stirrer
I'm
said
done
what I was going to say.
for a minute.
So I was just reading through some of the studies that are out there. I think Lois Davis is one of the researchers for RAND. In 2018, there was a study, and I think much to what Jamel is saying, and I'm from Boston, so I probably sound a little bit aggressive when I talk too. What I would say is that the findings in 2018, it says, we found that inmates participating in correctional education programs were 28% less likely to recidivate when compared with inmates who do not participate in education programs, which is great. But after that, it says, however, we find that inmates receiving correctional education were as likely to obtain post-release employment as inmates not receiving correctional education. So to me, the purpose and the research behind all of this, to what Jamil is saying, is there is a whole nother layer that's not being parsed out in these meetings, and that's the actual execution of getting somebody that job.
Wait, I don't understand. You said that people who have been involved in education programs are as likely to get employment as those who haven't. I should hope so. I mean, is that all they say?
Should
That
be
they're
higher,
less
should be
likely,
higher.
but not more likely?
I'm sorry, I think you're misunderstanding. It says, however, we found that inmates receiving correctional education were as likely to obtain post-release employment
Yes.
as inmates not receiving education.
Right. That suggests that they were only as likely, not, you would expect they would be more likely, right? If they had.
Correct. So what I'm saying is that there's a piece that Jamil was trying to discuss, and that's the actual execution of finding employment.
Yeah, and I don't know, Adam. I haven't read those studies for a while, but I have seen those studies. And is there a difference in the quality of job? Is another question. I mean, they're getting employment.
What it's saying is that it just because somebody has a correctional education, it does not necessarily mean that their post-released employment is any different from not receiving correctional education.
Right. I understand the percentages, but I also wonder if there's a quality thing. And that's a question for, in fact, I'm going to ask Lois Davis a little bit more about that. We talk every weekend. And
I'm sorry, but that's also like ban the box, right? A lot of ban the box initiatives have been found to be not advantageous to like minorities, for example.
Right. We have a big problem.
I think if we're gonna talk about like research and like having the right statistics, I think we need to parse it out and figure out like what are the right statistics? What are we looking at?
That's, yeah. So but probably in that big list we have, we should add ban the box, the big black hole, whatever you want to call it. And people should be looking at that because, you know, some trades we stopped doing behind bars because we couldn't get people into jobs. And you know, so that's real problematic.
Okay, John Feaster has put his hand up again, and then Danielle Cox, and we're getting close to
Getting to groups.
Yeah, I'll make my comment very, very quick. I just want to say that what Adam is saying is 100% true. Mr. Freeman, I 100% understand where you're coming from. Just for this particular group, not only do I oversee the Office of Correctional Education at Labor, I also see the Office of Workforce Development, in which we actually have a unit very specifically geared toward outreach to businesses to try to find businesses that are friendly to folks with a background. And it is very hard. For what Mr. Cummings is saying, at the end of the day, I think that correctional education does provide some practice and behaviors and things like that that will keep them from recidivating. So we do know the data says that they recidivate less with our education. But as far as getting jobs, and Adam, just so you know, there is some data that would suggest that they do a little better with those jobs. You know, without correctional education, maybe they average, 20 grand a year. With correctional education, they average 30 grand a year. It's still not enough. And Dr. Sturr, to your point, as far as the quality of the education goes, it's apples to apples, certificates to certificates. So it's not about whether or not they got a bad education or the quality was the reason why they didn't get that job. It very specifically was the background that came up, because a certificate is a certificate. There are no different levels to the quality of the certificate.
I agree, and I don't think I ever meant to implicate teachers as being not doing a good job. Because in my experience and working with them, we had terrific people, and I supervised some of them or worked next. So I think that there are a lot of great people doing good jobs teaching. It's a systemic thing, and there's other issues, and that's what we're out to identify. And then,
Okay, Danielle Cox and Jamel, and I'd ask you to be brief because we want to get to this last issue of the division into subgroups, at least.
No, I was going to say, Jamal, I appreciate your work, and I would more appreciate also the advocacy work that you could be doing, or if you are doing, like especially in Annapolis, for a lot of these laws and legislation, because no matter what we do behind the fence, that's just it. Adam said it correctly. No matter what we are trying to do and no matter what we put towards, and this commission says, if we're not addressing those certification and licensing, basically it's basically those licensings and then job issues, then once they're out, we're not going to make any headway. We are doing a lot of work with the Maryland longitudinal data systems to look to see whether they're getting jobs and what those wages are. But you're right, we're not seeing them getting jobs and where we've actually given them those education for those jobs, right? They're getting more of that labor type work. So we really do need to work on some of those laws. I think that probably should be something as a sub kind of recommendation, right? Hey, we want to do all this stuff, but there's this other little thing that if it's not changed, all this stuff we're recommending is not going to happen.
Well, okay. And we'll get going here with the groups here in a second, but you're right, Daniel. I've noticed that over the years, we had research that people are getting out of education and getting a job in another area, but sometimes they might be doing better because they feel better about themselves, even in another area, because they can achieve and they can do. And that's a big psychological thing.
Jamel?
Yes, just right quick, Dr. Livenberg. Look, please, I'm coming to you guys like respectfully and everything. I don't want to point fingers. I'm one of those ones where, okay, what's the problem? Then what can we do? I just want to fix it. That's it. And I'm just coming to you from a lived experience person. And I've actually gone through, like I said, I've just hit 5 years here in your state that I know is totally different from the Commonwealth, in which, where my dad was relocated to. But I just want whatever I can do. And I have to, Ms. Cox, I do a lot in the advocacy. I'm very low key with it. I just, this is personal for me. I've testified on 2 House bills, House Bill 1245 on fentanyl, and killing individuals. I've testified on that, and I've testified on House Bill 0061, Delegate Tavares, Delegate Taylor, for formerly reincarcerated. So I'm actually going to be testifying again. So anyone that, in any capacity I can assist and help with you guys, I would do my best.
No apology needed. And we know that it's as serious as everybody else here. So, and if you have to state something strongly, you do that. But we're doing it all in great respect for each other.
So I think we should
Good job forward, yeah.
to actually go into a breakout session or anything, but maybe Ainsley, the best thing would be if you sent out an email and asked people which of the 3 subcommittees they would like to be on.
Well, maybe we could do a real quick thing and then they can follow up with an email. Can we get a sense?
We could get a sense by asking people to raise their hand about which of the 3 groups we're missing. How many people do you have on the email list, Ainsley?
So we have 28, but we'd also have to include the whole commission on there. So we've got 28 that are advisory group and then the commission, which is a separate. So I'll send out an email to everybody asking what work group they would like to be put on. But we can also do like a little quick temp check if right now, if you want to do that.
So can we get like, do group number 1, ABE, GED, special ed, and have hands raised, see how many people are interested in working primarily with that group? Doesn't mean you can't sit in on others. So I see the delegate and John, and that's what I see so far, at least 2, right? Can you see more than me that want to do that? How many do we have? Okay, done.
Is the question how many want to be on the first group? Is that?
Yes, the question is who wants to be in the first group. So we have at least 3 that I see on my screen. And okay, let's take a look at the higher ed group. How many people want to be on the higher education group?
And I'd like to be on the first group and the third group.
I was just gonna say, can I filter through maybe all of them? And John and I kind of.
Right. I may need to invite a few additional folks to join us.
I tried to say that at the beginning, that you can go to any group, attend any group, but if you're gonna, because if we have that one group that nobody wants to be on, then we're gonna mix it in with another group.
Okay.
Andrea, are you raising your hand to ask a question, or you're saying you want to be in the higher education group?
For the higher ed. And should we maybe also put it in the chat just so it's kind of recorded?
Put it in the chat. So we have enough people. I mean, I know Andrea probably and Judith, and you guys can be another one. And who else in the higher ed group?
Gordon asked to be in the higher ed group, but then he had to hop off.
Diana Bailey, I think she wants to be the workforce group. Okay. So then them go to career tech and workforce. Just, we have some people for the first 2 groups. So how many people we have for the career tech and workforce development? So, okay. So we have enough people.
Could I just ask that the career tech and workforce development, are those people who will have already gotten GEDs or high school diplomas?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Well, wait a minute. Because almost all the shops, I mean, Danielle can tell otherwise, require a GED to get into. Yeah.
They all do.
Yeah.
One of the requirements of MCE as well.
Yeah, for MCE, definitely. Okay. So we have people for enough groups. So the next thing is logistics. We're probably given the much time as we had a discussion, which is a great discussion today. People want to break into those groups, we could set that up a little bit. But we need to figure out how these groups have their first meeting.
Yes.
Go ahead, Ainsley.
Oh, sorry. So I can email everybody, find out what group everybody wants to do, and then we'll figure out that first meeting after that.
Can we set up a doodle of some sort where?
Yeah, we can do that.
Everybody know what a doodle is? You make your choice of times that are your preferred times, and then we can work what the best time is for these groups to get started. And then for the sake of, let's say this, we can continue to talk today as long as you want, but Ainsley and I will meet with each group and we'll help you get started, and then we'll be there for anything you might need. And some of you people, like Danielle said, she wants to be everywhere. She wants to be omnipresent, and so that's okay. Didn't you say you'd like to be in every? Well, but the point is you can be in whatever groups you want.
Just more for the ABE, GD, and secondary, like more being in all the time. But if people need us to filter through, to ask questions, we can always do that. So.
Okay. So the groups are open to everybody. So the invites will figure them out so everybody knows all the groups are meeting, when they're meeting, so that anybody can meet with all of them. And I'm asking the delegates, I don't know if Delegate Pasteur is on here, but I had sent a note to each delegate the other day saying, please come to this meeting. By the way, you're going to be very busy soon for 3 months. Make an appointment of one of your staff people or somebody you know who could sit in for you. So I hope they will be able to do that. Are any of the delegates still on this call here?
I don't think so. I don't think there have been any others.
Yeah, because all three of them said they want to participate.
Who are the others? Marlon Ampry, is he one?
Ampry and no, not Marlon Ampry. Embry and Simpson.
Uh-huh.
So, and then Pasteur, of course. And then we'll work on trying to get some Senate representation over time. So it's a little after 11. Do you want to talk about how these groups can function a little bit? Like each one of you can choose somebody to take a little bit of charge, be your chair or something, and work directly with Ainsley and me in the setting up of your meeting. And maybe that will take the first meeting to figure out who that person is.
I hope that we'll take the whole first meeting. I hope we can get something else done.
I think Ainsley can set it up that our next meeting we'll set today will be to actually meet. We'll set up 3 groups. And we can do that, right? With the Google Meet, right? And they could be meeting. How do we do that?
Are we doing breakout groups?
Well, I was just thinking if we could do breakout groups our next meeting together, and then we'll get it launched, and then the people can meet separately after that. Would that make sense? Or
that makes sense. I think it might be a little bit difficult if we're doing scheduling for you and me to filter through, Dr. Stir and I, but I mean that's possible. We can do that if we want to.
So several people want to be on more than one committee, and if we do it as breakout sessions, they wouldn't be able to do that. But
well, let's do this then. Ainsley and I are going to take the poll that we have right now, and we'll email around again. We'll email around what we have, and then we'll do that in the next day or two, and say if you want to join one of these groups, let us know, because we're not sure where everybody is, because there's probably going to be people who aren't here today didn't get the invite, to do this. So we'll figure out what the groups are, and then we'll set up the logistics for the next meetings. We'll put out a doodle to see who can meet at the best time, and then each group meets separately, and then maybe once in a while we just have in between, we get the whole group back together again. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Can I make a suggestion for like the doodle polls and all, just because I'm done this so many times? You might want to have Ainsley, you, Steve, just send out one email that has a doodle poll attachment for each one of those groups. So like you'd have ABEGD. Here's the link for the doodle poll for that one. The same email, career and technical. Here's the doodle poll.
No, that's exactly what we want to do.
Yeah, so it's one email. If you want to sign up for either of these guys, click them and go in and put in your availability.
We can send out an email all the time that everybody sees, even if it's related to subgroup things, so everybody knows what's going on. So, okay. What else did we miss, or whatever? How badly did we confuse you today, or whatever? I mean, does everybody feel fairly organized and that we can proceed forward, and that the mission is clear, that what the law is and what we're supposed to be doing? Okay. And I just am glad that we got this stuff organized before the holidays, so when we come back we can get going very quickly. So Judy, thank you for chairing this, and for your future work chairing this thing.
So Steve, will there be a person like leading each one of those groups? How are you going to actually?
I said that, and so when we get the groups together, we're gonna have to decide that.
Yeah, presumably each group will appoint or elect somebody to be the convener, at least.
So if we don't get anybody, we'll have fallback people like Danielle will put you in charge of one. John Feaster will put you in charge of one. No, no, we'll strongly suggest people who we think in the group, if they can't come up with, we'll ask somebody if they want to do it or take a lead, and we'll assist them. You won't have to do the mail outs. You won't have to do all the, you know, we're background for you guys. We're logistics for you guys. All right, because you.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good. Well, have a great holiday, everybody, and we will see you sometime.